Hi, my name is Amina. I'm here to teach you how to work a simple long and short stitch flower using paint box straight cotton. First, we need to separate one strand from the batch. You can do it easily by just pulling it. To anchor your thread to the fabric, make a couple tiny stitches in the area which will be covered later. So in our case, it could be a petal. We make one tiny stitch and another one right over it. Pull on the thread to make sure it is well secured. If necessary, add one more stitch. Now we're ready to work the edges. Make a stitch along the outline. Bring the needle up in some distance away and pierce right through the first stitch. Keep repeating the steps by piercing every previous stitch. This technique is called split back stitch. It makes a nice dimensional line which is good for edging. Also, we don't have to worry about it being perfect since we are going to cover it later. You can use any color for working the outline since it has a purely technical purpose of lifting the edge a little, and as I mentioned, it will be covered with other stitches later. But I would recommend using number 179 because this is the first color we will use for most of the petals in long and short stitching. Before proceeding to long and short stitching, mark the direction of stitches and the color areas right on the fabric unless you are fine with improvising. Then make straight stitches along the marked lines and in between them. I call these stitches guiding stitches because they guide the direction of your long and short stitching and they set the tone and work as a sort of a cage, trapping the other stitches in between and making sure they don't break the overall flow of direction. Make sure your stitches don't cross at the bottom at this stage. And notice that I end them a little below the mark of the color area. I will explain the reason a little later. Now we can work this side of the petal, making the stitches close to each other and avoiding any gaps in between. Move downwards gradually, trying to maintain the correct direction and don't change the angle of your stitches much. Avoid laying them almost horizontally. Keep them standing, so to say, but a little slanted. Then you can proceed to fill the gaps between all the guiding stitches until you finish the first row of this petal. With the next row of stitches, let's use the darkest thread number 120. The order of work is practically the same. First, make guiding stitches, then fill the gaps. The stitches of the second row need to continue the direction of the first one. That's why we have to be very careful about the direction since the very beginning. When bringing the needle up for the new stitch, avoid doing so in between the stitches above, but rather try to pierce them from below. You may notice that I always end stitches below the marks of color areas, and I promised to explain why. So the reason is that I prefer to give more space for my stitches to vary their length and points of starting. In long and short stitching, the smooth blending is majorly achieved by making the row of stitches sort of ragged on the top. You can see that each stitch has a different starting point. Some start lower, some start higher. This variation is what makes the border between two colors harder to perceive. With the last color for this petal, which is 0158, I add some stitches to the right side to make a sort of a shadow here, and then finish the petal at the bottom using all the same steps. Guiding stitches, being careful about direction and filling all the gaps so that no fabric peeks through. Long and short stitching is often called needle painting, so let's make sure we don't show our canvas and fill the flower only with colors. Here is one finished petal, and we have two more that are identical in how they are worked. The fourth petal is situated above the rest, so we use only two colors of thread for it. Number 171 for the top, with both sides worked in it, and number 120 for the central part of the flower. The order of work is all the same, with the direction of stitches being a little more challenging here since we have both sides open. The last petal is situated under the rest of them, so it is a little darker, and we can use only two colors. Number 120 for the top, and notice that the top row doesn't reach any of the sides, and number 0158 to stitch the rest of the petal to the bottom. Like always, be careful about the direction of stitches and mark the lines right on the fabric if needed. It is better to spend a couple minutes brainstorming it in advance than working it over if stitches go wrong. Lastly, take one strand of thread 0181 and work lines in between the petals carefully to create a shadow effect. And add some stitches to the bottom of the petals as well to increase the depth visually. Our long and short stitch flower petals are ready. Congratulations on completing this lesson. I hope you learned something new. You can add French knots to the middle and work the leaves if you want. You can do it in the same technique of long and short stitching or in satin stitch, doing parallel stitches. In any case, thank you for joining this lesson, and let's meet again.